everybody, and welcome back to another WTF1 podcast. It's our third, I think, of 2022. Keeping count.
Carry this on.
You'll do this the entire year. You're going to be like, well, this is our
52nd today.
Yeah. But today, we're going to be talking about the F1 driver lineups and where you, the fans, have voted from 10th all the way to 1st. And then for us to chime in with our opinions too, because of course we always give our opinions, whether you like it or not. Now, Tom Bellingham, the WTF1 founder, how are you feeling 2 months away-ish to lights out in Bahrain? Are you
It's going to go really quick. We're only 2 weeks away from car launches, pretty much, and it still only feels about 40 seconds since Abu Dhabi finished, to be honest.
So you're coping okay. What about you, Katie? WTF1 author, annual writer.
Annual writer. Yeah.
People pleaser with your writing.
Well, thank you. Like Tommy said, it seems only a moment ago that we had Abu Dhabi, but I'm still hyped and ready for this new season, new regs, hopefully a bit of a clean slate for a lot of things. So bring it on.
Bring it on indeed. Now, before we dive into our ratings and your ratings and all that good stuff, WTF1 Clubhouse is back for 2022. Yes, if you don't know what it is, it's a massive camping experience we have at Silverstone where you guys can come and camp with us throughout the Grand Prix weekend. If you want to join us at the British Grand Prix on our campsite with entertainment, with an F1 quiz night, which to be fair, we didn't even know what people wanted quiz nights last year, but they did. They really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed being the quizmaster. Live WTF1 podcasts, so much more. You've got simulators, all good stuff. Then head to WTF1.com/clubhouse or click the link in the description to find out more. There you go. And you'll see all of us there. We'll be having a great time. Now, we created a form and asked all of you, the fans, to rate each 2022 driver lineup out of 10. We then got a score out of 10 for each team based on the average, and we're going to go from worst to best and talk about each one as we go. How's that sound? You good with that, Katie, Tommy? You ready for this?
Gravy.
Lovely stuff.
Okay, in P10. Drum roll, please.
Who could it be?
have Haas with 3.6 out of 10. Yeah. Well, I think it's difficult to be in a car like Haas, which we've seen throughout last year, because they were literally a Formula 2 car in a lot of respects due to their performances. Of course, Haas very much focusing towards 2022, where hopefully we'll get to see more representative results and we'll be able to see what both drivers can do in wheel-to-wheel combat potentially. But from what we saw, I think the 3.6 is very much maybe on Mick Schumacher's side as well, just maybe bumping those numbers up a little bit with some of the performances he did. Hungary is one that sticks in my mind of kind of getting his elbows out in that Haas. And I think he made Q2 in Paul Ricard, but then he did crash after that. Essentially, 3.6 is quite fair, but I think also these ratings can get roped in a little bit with the car performance. So it's, I guess it's the lineup as a whole. And we just haven't seen it, have we? We just haven't seen anything yet but crashes from both of them a lot last year, which would have cost Haas quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned there Schumacher maybe bumping up the score a bit, but in my opinion, maybe Schumacher will be bringing the score down with the amount that he crashed and the amount that he would have cost Haas in crash damage last year. I saw a graphic. I don't think it was officially from F1, but Schumacher was the driver that apparently caused the most amount of costly damage on his car out of the whole grid last year, which doesn't surprise me because he did have quite a few offs. So not great. Hopefully he can iron that out. But yeah, Haas as a duo, obviously Mick Schumacher, Nikita Mazepin, both rookies in 2021. And although, they're both young, talented drivers, we've seen great performances from them in their junior careers. They're still rookies at the end of the day. And I have a really bad feeling that because they're so young and inexperienced within the F1 bubble, that, giving feedback on the car and stuff like that, you're not going to have the same amount of knowledge and expertise than if, they kept Romain Grosjean or Kevin Magnussen and partnered him with a rookie. So yeah, very fresh-faced, new bunch of drivers in a car that is definitely probably the worst on the grid. So I can see why the fans put them at the back.
Yeah, I'd find it hard to argue that they're not the worst driver lineup in terms of, they were both rookies last season. Mick definitely had a lot more pace than Mazepin, but then, like Katie said, ended up crashing a little bit more. And we did see more moments, definitely, from Mick, but I still think he's a little bit obviously. Well, he is inexperienced, but also he's always been one of those drivers as well that throughout his career he seems to sort of get better after a few seasons.
He takes a year to warm up, Tommy.
Yeah,
I wasn't going to put my Schumi fanboy hat on just yet, but yes, he takes a year to warm up.
He's not like that driver like Leclerc, Verstappen, Norris, Russell, where they seem to go just straight in, and it's like, oh my god, wow, this guy's amazing. He's maybe Sainz you could put under that bracket where like a lot of people have now started to discover, oh my god, now he's got more experience under his belt. And we posted a graphic about Sainz where his point scoring and stats have gone up. Mick Schumacher seems more like that kind of driver that does a lot better after a second season. So yeah, I think hopefully if the Haas is better, we might actually get to see something from them, because it's so hard to judge how good they are when they're essentially racing no one. It's a bit like Williams a couple of years ago, where you just go, well, how can you grade this when they're 19th and 20th every race pretty much?
Yeah, very, very difficult to rate, but alas, came out 10th by quite a substantial margin. I really do hope to see Haas a bit further up the field, at least closer to the back of the field. I think that would be a good result. But they have been preparing the entirety of 2021, so really no excuses. And they have the most wind tunnel time and everything that they could possibly need for 22. They've got. Right, that's P10, done and dusted. 3.6 out of 10 for Haas. Now on to 9th. And I'm a little bit surprised by this one, quite savage in my opinion. But 9th goes to Alfa Romeo with 4.8 out of 10. Now, of course, that is Valtteri Bottas and Guan Yu Zhou, the pairing. And I'm surprised Bottas didn't bump up the numbers a little bit more here with his experience. I still rate Bottas as a driver. I think that Mercedes, whatever happened there, especially last year, just wasn't really working for him. But Bottas is still a very good driver, and on his day can be incredibly good. So maybe it's, again, Guan Yu Zhou being completely new, not many people rating him. I think Tommy's been on his defense a little bit over some podcasts, saying that some people are treating him like he's a bus driver coming into Formula One. That's not quite what Guan Yu Zhou is. But again, there's very little hype around Zhou really joining in terms of his potential. But I think the pair of them, Bottas can obviously teach Zhou quite a lot in the world of Formula One. And I think that's slightly unfair. I wouldn't have put them 9th, in my opinion.
Yeah, Guan Yu Zhou is obviously unknown because he's a rookie. I feel like he probably comes into the sport as kind of like maybe Latifi, who's a bit better now, but you don't put him under obviously like future world champion and loads of hype around him. But certainly not as bad as a lot of people seem to say. And I totally agree with you about Bottas. We've not been the kindest to him when he's in a Mercedes, and, you have to perform when you're in the top team, but he's certainly not as bad as a lot of people seem to think. And qualifying, especially, I feel like we might see the good performances. His racecraft is not really there. We've seen that so much, but in terms of, you're not a bad driver if you can out qualify and beat Hamilton in even just one race in your entire career in the same car. So, yeah, I agree with you. Actually, I would put them personally ahead of Williams, but
spoiler alert. We don't know if Williams is P8 or not. We haven't decided yet.
Well, we don't know yet, but we'll find out. But yeah, I feel like probably a step too low for me.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you guys. I think I'd put them a bit higher than this. Like you say, Guan Yu Zhou, yes, he's not, won the F2 championship or anything like this. And there's always going to be comparisons to people like Piastri, who, people argue should have been in that seat and stuff. So he's kind of started on the back foot already, probably feeling like there's a lot of F1 fans that don't think he deserves the seat or that kind of thing. But he's still, quick, talented young driver. And I'm always happy to see, fresh faces and new blood in the sport. I think it's a good thing and healthy for the sport. And obviously being Chinese as well is excellent. Just get a bit of variety on the grid, being the first Chinese driver to compete in a Formula One Grand Prix, which is very exciting. But yeah, with Bottas, the guy's a 10-time race winner. He's not, he had a bit of a yo-yo year last year, comparing his results like Hungary, which was just absolute carnage, disaster. Probably wants to erase that Grand Prix from his memory. But then looking at Monza, for example, after he was announced that he was going to Alpha, for me, that was possibly one of the best performances out of any driver on the grid of all of 2021, managing to get the unofficial pole on Friday and then sprint race victory pole thing, whatever F1 have decided to title it now. And then obviously being given the penalty, having to start from the back and then fighting his way up and getting on the podium. I think that's such an underrated performance. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how Valtteri is going to get on being a number one at a team, because with Mercedes for so long, he has been that wingman, that number two driver. And although there's been a bit of people not liking calling him a wingman, we all know that was the role that he was playing there to Lewis Hamilton. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him departing Mercedes, spreading his wings, becoming that dominant person in the garage out of the two drivers, and hopefully shaping Alfa Romeo back into a more competitive team, because maybe it's the same driver lineup they had with Giovinazzi and Raikkonen, but they became just quite stagnant. And, like when we're on the podcast giving them grades, it was like, just give them a C, because we didn't really see them do anything. So hopefully with a new lineup there, it'll be the shake-up that they need.
Yeah, I sincerely hope Bottas will be a bit more motivated than maybe we saw with Kimi Raikkonen and his younger compatriot of Antonio Giovinazzi. That partnership didn't really work too well, and I think it's because Kimi very much saw this as his last couple of years of just bants and just flying around the world and driving fast cars. So, I hope that Alfa Romeo do take a step forward. So that's 4.8 out of 10 for them, and P9 coming in P8 as told by Tommy, but only by 0.1 of a point.
You never know; they could have been first.
Yeah.
With 4.9 out of 10 is Williams in P8. And of course, that is Alex Albon and Nicholas Latifi. Felt like they deserve P9, to be honest with you. I think that obviously there's a lot of love for Alex Albon in the community. And I think that, everyone wants to see him do well. His time at Red Bull was pretty bad and ended very abruptly, and it was unfair, of course, for him to drop completely out of Formula One because there was no seats available. But he's now getting his time once again to prove what he's worth. Maybe build up that confidence that the likes of Pierre Gasly have needed. Pierre Gasly had exactly the same experience in Red Bull, went back to AlphaTauri, and just built his confidence and the foundations from there. So I'd like to see Alex do well, because I don't think he's a bad driver. He just wasn't able to perform at a top team straight away, just like we saw with Gasly. So, I think Nicholas Latifi, on the other hand, if he beats Alex Albon, that will be very bad for Alex's career. I think we've said that a few times in the podcast. But it's a potential. Nicholas has been in the sport for a few years now and is getting experience under his belt, and was better towards the end of the season. Maybe that's because of Russell falling off a little bit because he's thinking about the Mercedes, but I don't think Nicholas Latifi was too bad of a driver towards the end of the season. So Alex might have his work cut out, but brand new regs, completely clean slate. You have to think Albon will be the one to come out on top in that pairing.
Yeah, I mean, Latifi pleasantly surprised me last year, because he was another driver that kind of just disappeared into the shadows a bit at Williams when they weren't really doing anything particularly spectacular. But he's shown real glimpses of promise. And like you say, Albon coming back, I'm glad that he had that year out, because the way that, he left that Red Bull seat was, very public and not particularly pleasant. And we've seen it a few times with Red Bull. And like you say, with Gasly, he managed to jump into another team and get his confidence back. But Albon has still had quite a vital part to play with Red Bull. Obviously, last year, he was reserve driver with them and helping them develop that car a bit. And it obviously paid off because they were very competitive in 2021. But yeah, it's going to be a pairing that I'm excited to see how they get on. Obviously, they were teammates as well previously in F2 in 2018. And that year, Albon finished third. in the championship. He lost out to these really unknown drivers called George Russell and Lando Norris, I think it is. But Nicholas Latifi finished that year 9th. So quite a difference. Both won races in that year. But yeah, it was Albon who came out on top. So it'd be interesting to see if, where Nicholas knows he's got Williams support and he's been there for a few years now. This will be his 3rd year with Williams. He knows the team. He's got that to his advantage, whereas Albon's very much coming in as the new kid, even if he does have F1 experience. So, yeah, I think I would probably switch Alfa Romeo and Williams in this list. But, I mean, it was by such a minute difference, wasn't it? Like a 1 decimal point difference. So, yeah, very excited to see how Williams get on.
I feel like Albon, I'm really surprised they went for Albon. I hope he proves me wrong. And I think he's a lot better driver than obviously he could show at Red Bull, because we've seen Gasly, even Perez, obviously, who's done better, still can't get anywhere near Max. And obviously there's the talk of whether that's because they're a completely one driver focused team and the seat's cursed or whatever. So Albon, for a team like Williams to go for Albon when they're trying to, build something, it's a really interesting hire, because he obviously left the sport with not a lot of confidence, and he's come back in, and then with Latifi, they don't really have like a strong. This is why I think Alfa are better, because like Bottas is that experienced driver, like a really experienced driver that's in a seat. And again, it kind of goes the same with Haas. They've got sort of 2 younger drivers, and that clearly hasn't worked. So we'll see. But yeah, I agree with you guys. I'm surprised Williams pipped Alfa, but I think that's, like Matt's kind of alluded to, is Albon being very popular and Bottas maybe not so popular.
This is not a popularity contest, I promise. This is the ratings. But yeah. So Williams P8 with 4.9 out of 10. We now move to P7, and Aston Martin with 5.6 out of 10. Now, of course, that is the lineup of Lance Stroll and Sebastian Vettel once again. And yeah, difficult season for Aston Martin last year, wasn't it? They were slow for quite a bit of the season. They had, odd moments of pace, but generally speaking, especially towards the end of the season, they just really began to be nowhere. As for the lineup itself, Lance Stroll didn't really have, considering all the craziness, you'd expect Lance Stroll to get a crazy result, because that's what we've seen in prior years, getting pole position at Turkey or getting a podium at Baku and things like that. He's got a few podiums under his belt from crazy races, but Lance Stroll didn't really show that from last year. I keep thinking it's 21 at the moment, but it's not. It's the new year, Matt. And of course, Sebastian Vettel, 4-time world champion, is probably boosting that number a bit up as well. 5.6 out of 10. It's difficult again, because I think there is obviously an emphasis on the car performance as well. But I think Seb definitely showed still got potential. That Hungary drive, racing down Esteban Ocon, of course, Baku as well, and things like that. But yeah, it's going to be these teams like Aston Martin, like Haas, like Williams. They're all going to be difficult to judge unless they're really fighting in that midfield. I think there's definitely potential with Lance Stroll and Sebastian Vettel to be right up there with the other teams, just on talent alone. Lance Stroll's no pushover. He's had this. Oh, he's the rich kid and all this, but he is genuinely talented. He has podiums under his belt, and he wouldn't get that through money. It's not like he's got an extra 20 horsepower because Lawrence Stroll's bought a different engine for him. But yeah, I think 5.6 out of 10 is maybe a little bit harsh, but judging on last season, I can see why people voted it.
Yeah, I feel like Stroll again is probably bringing the rating down a little bit. You've got an extremely popular driver in Sebastian Vettel, and maybe not quite so popular driver in the community as Lance Stroll. For me, Stroll manages to be almost the most underrated driver ever, and also kind of overrated driver ever, because I see nothing on Twitter but either he's awful and shouldn't be in F1 and he's rubbish, or like some people that think he's like Verstappen, Hamilton level, which in my opinion, no, I think he's just good. I think he's good and decent, but no one seems to just say he's just decent. There definitely just seems to be. It is literally like he's a proper like Marmite driver, but he's decent enough, and obviously Vettel is a 4-time world champion, even if he's not in his prime anymore. But again, it kind of comes down to the car. Look at 2018 when he was at Ferrari and he was challenging Hamilton for the title, and then things changed, and then the 2020 Ferrari wasn't very good, and now everyone's talking about how he's completely fallen off. So the car does have a lot to do with it. But again, like you're right, these teams are kind of hard to judge because there are a lot of drivers where you're like the car, the driver. But I think it's still a decent lineup. I think it's probably just so low down because there are better ones.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking like 7th is quite harsh for a 4-time world champion, and like you say, Lance Stroll is a strong, decent driver. Yes, he didn't have the shock results that we've seen him have in previous seasons in Formula One, but he still manages to put in good performances from time to time, and like you say, that's nothing to do with money. He has got raw talent there, but then you look at the other ones that are still to come and you're like, oh, but actually maybe they have got a stronger line. Like, it's quite difficult to place them. So I don't envy the fans that were voting in this at all. But yeah, it's still a good lineup. I mean, with Sebastian, obviously he got the podium in Baku, which was excellent and very well deserved. And then in Hungary, which was ultimately taken away because of a fuel issue. But still, you could argue that maybe with his experience, he should have won that race and passed Esteban Ocon. He was on his tail for most of the Grand Prix, yet Ocon held him off. So you could say that maybe he should have actually had that victory. But I'm quite glad
bit disqualified.
Yeah, I was like, I'm quite glad that he didn't in a way, because I don't think my heart could have taken that like disappointment. But yeah, it's just a strong lineup. I mean, but as Tommy said, there are better, which seems mad when you put Sebastian Vettel in a team and you're still there saying, yeah, there are people that are better on the grid, but maybe he's past his peak. Is that? I think that's fair to say.
Yeah. He's
sorry, Seb.
No, I mean, he's still got the talent, but you can't expect him to be in his prime still. There are 6 other better teams according to this poll. It's the new year, which means we've all got exercise on the brain. But really, what you need is to exercise your brain. Resolve to strengthen your mind with a mindfulness practice. And just like a new gym routine, you may need a little help from a trainer. That's where Calm comes in. We're partnering with Calm, the #1 mental wellness app, to give you the tools that improve the way you feel. Clear your head with guided daily meditations, improve your focus with Calm's curated music tracks, and drift off to dreamland with Calm's imaginative sleep stories for children and adults. If you go to calm.com/WTF1, you'll get a limited time offer of 40% off a Calm Premium subscription, which includes hundreds of hours of programming, and new content is added every week. Over 100 million people around the world use Calm to take care of their minds. Sleep more, stress less, live better with Calm. For listeners of the show, Calm is offering a special limited time promotion of 40% off a Calm Premium subscription at calm.com/WTF1. Go to calm.com/WTF1 for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. That's calm.com/WTF1. Using the internet without ExpressVPN is like leaving your keys in your car while you run into the petrol station for a snack. Most of the time, you're probably fine, but what if you come back to see someone driving off with your car? Why does everyone need a VPN? Well, every time you connect to an unencrypted network, cafes, hotels, airports, any hacker on the same network can gain access to your personal data, passwords, financial details, and so on. It doesn't take much technical knowledge to hack someone either. Just some cheap hardware is needed. A smart 12-year-old could do it. Your data is valuable. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per person selling personal information on the dark web. Why use an ExpressVPN? It creates a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet, so hackers can't steal your sensitive data. It's super secure. It'll take a hacker with a supercomputer over 1 billion years to get past ExpressVPN's encryption. It's easy to use. Fire up the app and click one button to get protected, and it works on all devices, phones, laptops, tablets, and more, so you can stay secure on the go. I love using ExpressVPN because I know my personal data is safe when using the internet. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/WTF1. That's expressvpn.com/WTF1, and you can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/WTF1. So let's move on to P6. So Aston Martin 5.6 out of 10. AlphaTauri comes in at P6, which I think, interesting.
Tommy's rigged the voting.
Yeah. Well, no, Tommy's not voted enough, in my opinion, for Yuki Tsunoda. 6.2 out of 10 for AlphaTauri. Of course, Pierre Gasly had an amazing season last year. As much as he took a lot of headlines, Pierre Gasly, with a lot of amazing qualifying performances, but when you actually look at the points scored, some of that may be down to race pace within the car and whatnot, but AlphaTauri also messing up on the strategy a lot, which didn't give them potentially the maximum points, in my opinion. Like, for example, the very crazy decision, was it Imola, where they decided to go on wet tyres when everybody else was on inters?
Yeah.
Things like that were crazy things. Like they P4 on the grid, I think it was. And they were like, yes, wet tyres. It just wasn't necessary.
They keep trying to do this hero strategy to get a crazy result.
Which you do if you're knocked out in Q2 or something, and you know at the back of the grid, and you go, right, let's whack on a set of wets like Haas would do or whatever. But AlphaTauri, I feel like Pierre Gasly obviously had an amazing season. I think he's in great form going into next year. Yuki Tsunoda obviously had a brilliant result in Abu Dhabi, as I'm contractually obliged to mention by the WTF1 founder himself. But I would, I don't know. I'm surprised they're P6, to be honest. But I think they maybe deserve a few more percentiles. Is that the word? I don't know. Like dots. Like 6.2. I feel like they deserve to be more like the 6.8, 6.9. You know what I mean? Like the higher percent. Anyway, I think that generally speaking, they're a strong lineup. If Yuki gets his act together, he's shown he's got potential. He's just needed a season to harness it. Next year, I'm not the conductor of the Yuki hype train like Tommy is, but I think they could achieve some good stuff. And they've got similar parts to Red Bull coming on their car as well. So yeah, why not?
It does make me wonder if Yuki didn't have that strong result in Abu Dhabi, if this would be much, much lower. Because although Pierre's great, and sometimes his performances, when we were doing our quali predictions and we were putting our top 5 in, you could easily whack Pierre Gasly P5, and that wouldn't be a bold prediction. That would be pretty standard, that he could bring the AlphaTauri into the top 5 and be sort of best of the rest, really. So a brilliant job from him, but he finished P9 in the driver's standings, which, like we said, doesn't really feel truly representative of how much he was hyped and what a good job he did, but they just seem to fall back AlphaTauri in the races. But yeah, I think I would put these guys a lot lower, mainly because of Yuki, because although he is a great little racer, and there's no denying that, he's also incredible. No, I didn't mean that in hype, by the way.
Just the way you said it, I was like, no.
I mean, I'm also tiny and short, so me and Yuki, I think actually I'm smaller than Yuki. I found that out the other day, which is concerning. But yeah, like, he's very erratic, and although on a good day he can put in some stunning performances, he's mega quick, so talented, he also became best mates with causing red flags and hitting the wall in qualifyings and practice sessions, and getting angry when he was going over the pit lane line in Austria, and all these kind of little hiccups that he was making through the season, which didn't make his life very easy. So I would probably put these guys a bit lower, which, I mean, I feel bad for Pierre, but we're ranking driver lineups as a duo. So mate, you're going a bit further down with Yuki, I'm afraid.
This may surprise you, but I've put him first.
I love Yuki Tsunoda.
No, however much it pains me to say it, yeah, I would probably put them lower than Aston Martin as well, mainly just for I'm obviously a Yuki fanboy, but I could admit he had a pretty poor season, and still very inexperienced. He needs to have a solid year to prove. And then Pierre's a difficult one because he's been really good since he came back to AlphaTauri, but you never know. I don't want to, for me, I rate him really highly, but you never know just how good the AlphaTauri was. It's really hard to tell how good the AlphaTauri was last year because it qualified so well, like you say. I mean, he was P2, wasn't he, in Qatar? But then they really didn't get many points. And I've actually just realized that the list so far is just the constructors title. But for me, I'd actually put AlphaTauri lower than Aston Martin. So Yuki, come on.
Interesting.
I want to put you first next year, so please.
Yeah, I think we'll get on to this next position, which is Alpine at 6.8 out of 10. I'm looking at that, and I think that's thrown me as well a little bit because I would put Alpine maybe a little bit further down in terms of score, but not by much. But then Aston Martin and Alfa, I feel like they all just deserve to be a bit closer together. But Alpine is P5 with 6.8 out of 10, 0.6 ahead of AlphaTauri. Of course, Fernando Alonso had a pretty good year overall, had some great performances. Esteban Ocon, of course, won in Hungary and had some reasonable performances too. It's so difficult. It's such a difficult thing to because then you go, well, yeah, but no, Aston Martin P7 with a 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll, who I think are both very good drivers. AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly, I think, was one of the drivers of the season, and yet Yuki was a little bit worse. It's so difficult to order these, but the fans are like, nah, there's going to be a huge 0.6 gap between Aston and AlphaTauri and then AlphaTauri and Alpine. But yeah, Alpine it was a car that kind of went back and forward in 2021. It wasn't like it was consistently good. Obviously, we kind of questioned its massive airbox and things like that. Was that the way to go? It was a very different design to a lot of the other cars. And Fernando didn't exactly have the quickest start to the season. It's just whoa, where are we going with this one? P5, is that about right? Mate, yeah, I guess so. Because Esteban won a race and Fernando had an amazing podium in Qatar. Is that where it was?
Yeah.
Yes.
Qatar, yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just great. What a great podcast. I don't have a clue. These numbers just throw my brain.
Yeah. Alpine, AlphaTauri, and Aston Martin. Yeah, you could go either way with them because Alonso for me, how much I rate Fernando Alonso. I think he's really good. Even I'd say even not in his prime, but he's still Fernando Alonso and can just do ridiculous things with a car that shouldn't be anywhere near there. And Ocon is a very confusing driver for me because it's weird to think for the first time since it actually came out, I watched the first season of Drive to Survive. And it was really interesting that Ocon was hyped up like this George Russell. He should be in the Mercedes seat ahead of Bottas. He's a future world champion. You had Lewis Hamilton saying he's a future world champion. And then, I don't know, his career's not really gone the way I thought it would. And obviously against Ricciardo, he wasn't that great. And the hype kind of fell off quite a lot. But he's still a good driver. But yeah, it's a solid lineup. It actually shows that you could argue that it shows that despite all the moaning about how Formula One is money, there's some really good drivers in Formula One, which shows how hard it is to actually, do this list. That a team that are fifth have a race winner and someone that was hyped up and an amazing junior driver, and Fernando Alonso, who's, in my opinion, one of the greatest drivers ever. So, and they're fifth on the list. It says a lot, doesn't it?
I definitely think Alpine should be fifth on this list. It's no secret that I I adore Esteban Ocon. I think he's really lovely lad and also a very quick driver, not just his win with Alpine, which you could argue, came in very fortunate circumstances when Valtteri Bottas and Lance Stroll decided they want to go bowling at the start of the Hungarian Grand Prix. But, he still made it work. He kept off Sebastian Vettel. And I think, although, his teammate helped keep Hamilton at bay as well, he earned that victory and I'm very happy for him. But even before then, he had some good moments with Renault. I mean, look at the secure second place that he managed to get and his elation and happiness in the podium. Still some of the most wholesome moments in him in the media pen and stuff. It's very cute. But also with Racing Point, he got a shock third place qualifying. I can't remember which race it was, but that was an amazing result. So he's had lots of glimpses of real promise there, and 2021 allowed him to show some of that, of course, the other side of the scales. He also, once he signed that Alpine contract till, I think it's 2024, which is like a long-term contract. Only a few other drivers on the grid like Verstappen and Leclerc have contracts that length. And then it seemed to just be like complete bad luck. As soon as he signed that contract, his performance just took such a dip and had a really bad run of results, and people questioning if Alpine had made the right call. But I think him alongside Fernando Alonso is a really strong lineup. I had my doubts about Fernando at the beginning of 2021. That's not something I shy away from. But they've really come together, made a great team. There seems to be no kind of bitter rivalry or, they seem to just be working really well, gelling really well together.
Wait till they have a race winning car.
Yeah. For the moment, it seems pretty nice and a good setup there. But yeah, I think that they are like a good, strong unit. And I'm really interested to see how they get on in 2022, because if they are as competitive as Fernando Alonso seems to be alluding to, that's going to be a big no. No.
I can't believe you agreed to that.
Yeah, me neither. I've been thinking about that every day since I said that on the podcast. I've been like, why did I say that? But yeah, I think they're a great duo, and I think they deserve to be fifth on the list.
You make a good point, actually, about I kind of forgot until you mentioned it, that if you'd said at the start of the year that, because I guess one thing we've not really got into is like how well teammates gel together and how Ocon was with Perez, like the most crashy teammate, and how Alonso is a bit of a teammate killer. I'd have thought there'd be fireworks between these two, and maybe like Matt said, that give them a winning car when they're on the same bit of road, and it's podiums on the line on a regular basis, or going for wins. Then they're probably not going to be so nice to each other. But I think it's quite surprising, actually, that they did seem to like be this really good team. Like they were just really good teammates. And and Ocon, himself said that all this myth, well, you say myths about Alonso, maybe it's just because it's a different Alonso that he's racing against. But yeah, that was quite surprising, because at the start of the year I'd have gone, yeah, these two are going to fall out.
Yeah, I still think that, and the team dynamic changes a lot whenever you get a race winning car. But I think if Alpine got a race winning car, Alonso would slot Esteban Ocon straight into his pocket, and then he would do everything to make him his number two, no matter what. But that's something we'll have to wait and see. Yeah, Esteban Ocon. It's weird, as you say, Kate, the potential, the hype that was behind him. Because I think at this stage in his career, if he really wanted to be in with a shout, maybe in a few years' time to get a top seat, he'd needed to have seen off Fernando Alonso, who's come back into the sport. He'd needed to potentially be better against Sergio Perez a bit as well. I know those two fought quite hard, but then when Perez now goes to the Red Bull seat, you then see the difference between Verstappen and Perez. So yeah, it's a shame. I think Ocon, maybe we all thought he'd maybe do a little bit better. Maybe he took a bit of a confidence dip as well after he was seen with his blue bag over his shoulder leaving Abu Dhabi after losing his seat, sadly. But maybe he'll build up some confidence over the next few years. We'll see. Right. Moving on to number 4. And it is McLaren with 7.7 out of 10. So nearly a whole point ahead of Alpine. But they slot in P4 with, of course, Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo. Oh, yeah. Does 7.7 do it? I think that's a tiny bit high after Daniel Ricciardo's performances last year. It's going to be unpopular, that opinion. I don't think by much. I think that the low sevens maybe. Lando Norris was obviously brilliant throughout a lot of the season, but I think Daniel Ricciardo really let down McLaren last year. As much as I absolutely love the man, he's my favorite driver on the grid in terms of personality. He didn't deliver in that McLaren, and it kind of gives cause for concern moving into 22 what he's going to be able to deliver, because he wasn't able to jump into a McLaren that was already very much into the regulations, wasn't able to adapt then. How will he be able to adapt to a new set of regulations? That's the kind of worries I have in my head. He was a lot better towards the end of the season. Was that Lando falling off a little bit rather than Daniel making gains? I'm not sure, but you have to say that Daniel did improve from the start to the end of the season. But I just felt like, if we're going off recency bias, which is kind of what this whole poll is about, we are thinking about very much the last season, unless we're talking about Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso in their glory days. And yeah, they're champions. I think maybe it's a tiny bit high, but not by much. I still think they deserve P4.
It is mad, isn't it? Like, if you were going through and doing this from the start of 2021, although Lando, the start of 2021, he put in some incredible results, was one of, if not the sort of most hyped, talked about driver on the grid with what he was managing with that McLaren. But yeah, you'd say, wow, Ricciardo and Norris, what a great lineup. And then Danny Rick had his first few races, and yeah, he really seemed to struggle. And that was a theme that continued for most of the season. And, looking at it on paper, Ricciardo was a 7-time race win, obviously now 8-time with Monza this year or last year. Going to keep doing that. But yeah, it's last year with McLaren has really caused a bit of a dent in his reputation, which feels like, I feel bad saying it, because like you say, everyone loves Ricciardo. Everyone's a Daniel Ricciardo fan. Even if you say you're not, you secretly are. But one of the reasons why so many people get behind him, aside from his personality, is he's got quite a aggressive driving style. He refers to himself as the honey badger. He's the last of the late breakers. He's always, going into a corner trying to get the come out of it the other side first, and watching him race when he was at his peak and like Red Bull and stuff like that, it was so entertaining, so fun, and great to watch. But yeah, like, it's mad to look at this now and think he's actually bringing them down against Lando Norris, who had only been in F1 for a couple of years. He's not even won a race yet, which I know, if you look at Russia, you could say that if the weather gods had not decided to chuck it down with rain, he would have won that race. But unfortunately, he didn't. But yeah, it's a strange dynamic, because I would, on paper, think Ricciardo and Norris would be a stronger pairing than Norris and Sainz, for example. But actually, now having seen the grid have that little reshuffle, I'm starting to think that, yeah, the 2020 lineup of McLaren was much stronger. And that's a team of 2 drivers that have very limited podium experience or wins or anything like that. But just goes to show what a crazy 2021 season it was.
Yeah, we promise this isn't just the constructors title order, because again, I think this is the whole thing so far. But I kind of agree with this. For me, McLaren sit sort of in the bracket of this is maybe a bit high, 7.7. For me, when I look at them, comparing it to Aston, Alpha, Tauri, and Alpine, but for me, they're not in the bracket of the next lot, which we'll go into. But yeah, I'm the same as you. I can't believe that we're sat here talking about Daniel Ricciardo, a race winner, bringing down the grade against Lando Norris, who had an amazing season, despite perhaps not doing as well as people thought at the end of the season, which I think was personally, I think was a bit of bad luck as much as it was performance-wise. McLaren, for me, I probably would put them fourth, but I'd put them closer to the Alpines rather than closer to the top that they are.
Love that. We're in the same opinion. Right. So now we move to the top three. Very exciting.
Dun, dun, dun.
Who is going to get third place? Well, it is Red Bull with 8.2 out of 10. I think I agree with this. Obviously, this is the 2022 lineup. So, of course, Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez once again. I agree with this because Perez wasn't as good as I had hoped he'd be going into the season as a whole. Of course, he did win Max Verstappen the world title. I'm not denying that. You know, the amazing defensive driving he did in Abu Dhabi, and he had some great moments as well throughout the year. Of course, you know, winning in Baku and being on the pace then to take advantage of Max Verstappen's unfortunate tyre failure. But over the course of the season, he wasn't quite on the same standard as Verstappen. And, you know, that's very obvious and clear to see that the pace wasn't there. So that's what, for me, does bring the grade down. I think 8.2 out of 10 is probably about right, in my opinion. Of course, Max, I think, was, you know, a 9.5 or something. But Sergio certainly did bring that down a little bit. So, yeah, no, I think P3 is fair. Going into 2022, it is very much a case of like there's one team member in some of these that is dragging the grade down, because you think 8.2 out of 10, you got Verstappen in the team, no way. But it's a collective. And I think I agree with that.
Yeah, same here. It's because of, obviously, it's not a spoiler alert because we know the last two teams. And I think the strongest thing of them is they've got two very strong drivers, whereas Red Bull, Perez is a very good driver, but he definitely, like Ricciardo has done, because he didn't do quite as well as we expected, brings the grade down. Obviously, Max, in my opinion, is the best driver on the grid with Hamilton, top of the kind of pack. But then Perez, he had a good season. He's definitely better towards the end. So I feel like if he continues that into this year, it'd be like, okay, here's the Perez. Because at the end of the day, Red Bull is a tricky one, because we know that second car, you know, we're there applauding Gasly for being incredible, and after his Monza win, we're like, oh, he should go to Mercedes, he's amazing. And you know, he was in that car and couldn't do anything, and Albon couldn't do anything, and Perez hasn't maybe he didn't beat Max once on pace, which you think, you know, at least one race you might be able to. He's a good driver. So this is one I do definitely agree with the fans, despite my Max bias. Like it's not a collective, but that's kind of what has helped Max win the driver's title, and could be the thing that helps them next year. You know, the other two teams having two good drivers battling against each other. Maybe this is the advantage for Red Bull as a driver lineup, that they do just have one really good driver. We've seen it before in the past, that it works with like a Michael Schumacher or whatever, where, you know, he's just going to get the best out of the car and he can win the constructor's title on his own, so it doesn't matter. Maybe this is the way to go. But yeah, I think 8.2 is a fair rating.
Yeah, it's a funny one, because like comparing the last two that we've got, they've both got two drivers which are at the top of their game, which is why they're at the top of the charts, because they make such a strong duo. But it's not to say that Perez is weak and, you know, it's just all Max and Perez is sort of like really struggling and trailing behind, because we saw towards the end of 2021 that Perez got comfortable within that team. He's was able to make calls to the car to make it more suitable to his driving standards. And I'm not sure if that's maybe an age and experience thing, where he's, you know, perhaps, and this is just me coming up with ideas and scenarios in my head, but maybe with Gasly and Albon, they were so young that maybe they were afraid to ask for things to be set up in certain ways, or didn't quite know how to convey how they wanted the setup to be. Whereas Perez, you know, he's been in Formula One for like a decade almost, and he's got so much knowledge and expertise under his belt that he could ask for, you know, ABC to be done to the car, and it was towards the end of the season. I'm not sure why his performance picked up, but I would guess it was something to do with, setup and getting more comfortable within that. But yeah, Perez is still a very strong driver. On his day, he can pull off some amazing defending driving and all that kind of stuff, hold people back as well. So yeah, I think it's right that they're in third. Well, obviously Max Verstappen is their reigning world champion now, so it's obviously a very strong setup. But in comparison to the other two, that this is the one that's got a dynamic of one driver that is a lot stronger than the other. Not to, like I say, Perez is rubbish or anything.
It's okay, Katie. You're allowed to say that Max is better than Sergio.
Well, yeah, but I'm not saying that Perez is rubbish, because he's not. It's just Max is better.
He's indeed. Music to Tommy's ears. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, the person that finished ahead in every single race is the better driver. But
controversial.
Controversial.
Katie comes out with a shocking opinion. Right. Now we get to the final two. In P2 and not winning the driver poll by 0.01 of a point. In P2, it is Mercedes with 8.84 out of 10. Of course, the brand new lineup, or at least one half, is Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. I think this is a little bit high. I think that we're probably looking at the 8.5 region, in my opinion, for Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. I think, obviously, Lewis Hamilton, we don't need to really go into his accolades, 7-time world champion. Let's not talk about 2021 in case you're a Lewis fan. He is one of the best drivers on the grid. He's very much getting towards the stage now where you'd expect naturally, getting older, his performances are going to start to maybe tail off a tiny bit. Maybe next year won't be that, because he will have a fire in his belly if he decides to carry on. We might have to change this rating if he bins off Formula One and we've got Nico Hülkenberg in the seat. But for me, George Russell had amazing performances in that Williams. He really took that car in certain situations, Spa qualifying, for example, and put himself in a position which he did not deserve to be. The one thing that holds me back from giving him Mercedes needed 9.5 or whatever, is that we haven't seen him, apart from obviously Bahrain that time where he filled in for Lewis Hamilton. It was a great performance, but he was beating Bottas, and also it was one of the easiest tracks to learn. There's still a tiny bit of me where I'm like, I need to see George Russell do this in a top team where he's had the pressure of the whole season on him. Now it's time to perform. So looking at that, there's just that tiny bit of, I need to see him be a race winner. I need to see him beat, Lewis Hamilton on time to time, like Bottas did when he had his peak at Mercedes a few years ago. So yeah, I think 8.84, maybe a tiny bit high, but they deserve P2, in my opinion.
I have quite a different opinion about Russell, in that I think that he's going to be, I'm not saying challenging Hamilton, but from the snapshot that we saw in Sakir, when obviously he covered for Hamilton after he got COVID, I was flabbergasted at what he was able to do, and that's a big word. But he got called up last minute. I'm sure there was an element of the whole situation where he was like, I've got one chance, or to quote the great JLS, as I used to be a big fan of, you only get one shot, so make it count. You might never get this moment again. And, he really made the most of it. He had, his shoes were too small. He couldn't really fit properly in the car. And yet he managed to pretty much, nearly beat Bottas in qualifying, and then managed to get the lead at the start of the race. And I think without all of the drama of the pit stop shenanigans, and then this reported puncture that he had towards the end, he would have beaten Bottas comfortably, won that race, and he did a great job. And we've just sat here in the same podcast and said how good Bottas is and how he could challenge Hamilton on his day. So I'd like to think that Russell could come in and do a similar kind of level with Hamilton. It might take a bit of getting used to. He might be, we've spoken about this countless times on the podcast, but not wanted to come in guns blazing as soon as we get to Bahrain. He might try and keep his cool a little bit and get comfortable within the team, and then start putting in these performances and being really close to Hamilton. But I have faith that Russell is going to have a good season. And I'm excited to see what he can actually achieve with a car that is built for him, and he's not having to squeeze his huge frame into this tiny little car.
I am glad this is a fan voted one, because for me, this is so hard to pick. And that shows by them being 0.01 apart over thousands of votes. For me, Mercedes probably, if I had to pick, just edges it, because I'm clearly British scum and British bias. No, because I agree that Russell, he still has something to prove for me on a Sunday. And I know he's obviously in a Williams and he can qualify really well, and he can only do so much in that car. But for me, yeah, like some say, if we're like comparing the two teams equally, like for me, Sainz is better than Russell. But however much I'm not on this Leclerc bashing hype train that seems to be at the moment, Hamilton is a 7-time world champion, in my opinion, one of, if not the greatest of all time. So he...
Come on, you said that for Fernando and now for Lewis. Come on, you can't be cute saying it for everyone.
I can call them one of the
greatest, because that's Max.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to say that for him.
No, yeah, I mean, Hamilton is unbelievably good. So for me, he pushes the grade right up. But I'm so excited to see this lineup, because, yeah, we've been pretty much since 2017, 2018, where we soon realized that Bottas was not going to challenge Hamilton for a title. And we had the whole podcast of, you didn't realize how much we missed Rosberg until he went and have someone to push him. So, yeah, it will be exciting to see a driver that you hope and a lot of people believe could challenge Hamilton a lot closer. And I'm really interested to see what Mercedes do about it. So, yeah, it's an amazing lineup, and just also a really interesting dynamic that you've got Hamilton at the end of his career, Russell at the start of his career. And it's almost like looped back round almost of, Hamilton was that young driver against a world champion. And I can't wait to see it. Yeah, can we just start the season now, please?
I cannot wait. This is the most exciting lineup, isn't it? It's the most exciting lineup by a mile, just to see where does George Russell stack up against Lewis Hamilton. We didn't think we'd ever see it. We all expected it to be Bottas once again, boring, and then Hamilton will eventually retire. But we don't get that. We get a showdown. George Russell very much wanting to prove himself. So yeah, Ferrari are the winners of this poll by 0.01. With 8.85 out of 10. And yeah, I agree. There's arguments for both sides in terms of the driver lineups between Ferrari and Mercedes. It depends how much you believe in George Russell's ability and how much you think they all need to prove. When we look at Ferrari as well, Charles Leclerc no doubt has unbelievable talent. I think he is still very error prone and can make mistakes. We've seen that. And as I'm saying this, I'm now thinking Ferrari deserve to be just behind Mercedes. But then on the flip side, I think those two drivers are on such a level where I think in 2022, if they have a decent car, they will push themselves even further forward. And Carlos Sainz proved that he has the pace to match Charles Leclerc. I don't think over the course of a season he's maybe as good as Charles Leclerc. I know he beat him in the standings, but there's plenty of different variables if you want to dive into that. But as a team, I think they are the most exciting lineup in terms of future potential and going into 22 as teammates as well. They've had that year together. They're going to constantly learn. You can tell that I'm very much on the Ferrari hype train for next year. This year.
It gets shot every time we get the years wrong.
Get the years wrong. You can tell, but it's nearly the end of January, Matt. Get it together. But yeah, I can see the arguments both ways. Am I going to stick with my guns and say Ferrari are the most exciting and potentially best lineup for this year? Yes, I'm going to stick with it, but it is marginal. And please don't hate me. I am fanboying, and I will fully accept that. Yeah,
it's so close, this one. We did a graphic recently of pick two drivers for 100 million, and we put like different tiers of like race winners, champions, blah blah blah. And I looked at that graphic a few times, and it kept coming back for me that Leclerc and Sainz were two really good drivers to pick in it, and it just shows that, you know, it's just such a good lineup. And I think the one thing they've got over the Mercedes lineup is two drivers that are going to push each other, but they've also got age on their side as well. They're both fairly young, not babies, but like fairly young, and got a lot of time left in Formula One, you'd think. And I'd even say both of them, for me, are in the top 5 drivers in F1, talent-wise. So, really, really exciting. For me, Leclerc has been a bit underrated by a lot of people because of what happened last year. And I think a lot of that, he is definitely error-prone, but I don't think it's a coincidence that the error-prone drivers, and I can sympathize as a Max fan. And even like Hamilton this year, when the car wasn't good, he was making mistakes. It's funny how the drivers that are making all these mistakes are the ones that don't have the machinery quite there. And obviously Leclerc had a brilliant car, and now he's probably trying to overdrive it to compensate for that gap. And we've seen that with Verstappen, we've seen it with Hamilton, we've seen it with other great drivers. So Leclerc, brilliant driver. Sainz proved me wrong. I thought he was good, but not amazing, and he just gets better every year. And has, for me, he's definitely in that top. Well, not quite top, but he's proved to be one of the best in F1 now. So it's such a good lineup, and I understand why Ferrari fans are on such a big hype train, because they've got an amazing lineup there.
Yeah, I think this one, like you say, is so close with Mercedes, but I think it might just pip Mercedes as the best driver lineup on the grid. One thing that stands out with Sainz and Leclerc compared to, the other drivers that we've got in our top 5 or top 6, top 7 even, is that they are the lineup with two drivers that are of similar age and similar experience, which could be why we are putting them on such a level playing field. Because if you look at Mercedes, obviously, as you said, Tommy, Hamilton, 7-time world champ, sort of maybe coming towards that end part of his career now. Russell just joining. Red Bull, you've got almost the opposite way around, with Max being the younger driver and Perez being the older driver, but it's Max there that it's got the interesting age dynamic. Same with McLaren, same with Alpine. Young driver Fernando Alonso, who's just, I think, he turned 40 now, and Esteban Ocon, who's still very fairly young, and Aston Martin has got the same dynamic. Alfa Romeo have. But Ferrari for me is just the right balance of super fast, talented, maturity as well. They've done just enough time in Formula One to get an understanding of what is really needed from them. And although last season we did see quite a lot of irrational mistakes, whether that's Monaco qualifying, sorry to bring that up, Matt, I don't mean to cause you to shed a tear at the thought of that. But even with Carlos, he had his fair share of shunts with the wall, and normally at the most inconvenient of times. I know you could argue, I guess, in the race is quite an inconvenient time, but right before qualifying in FP3, he had a shunt with the wall. I think it was in Zandvoort, and a few other knocks and bashes as well. But I'm hoping that they've got it out their system, and if they can erase those mistakes, and they've got this amazing power unit behind them that they've upgraded, and this fresh, clean slate, that Ferrari could be the team to beat.
I kind of want to change my mind now.
Oh, hello! You want to come on the Ferrari hype train? Come with us.
It's so difficult. It's so difficult. I think what I'll say is, if
get a return ticket,
I'll still go with Mercedes as the better lineup. But if I was starting a team now and had to pick a team for longevity and future and everything, I think Ferrari are looking in the best shape.
Well, I should hope so. Otherwise, Hamilton's going to be about 45 by the time you've developed.
I wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah. So, if you've if you've been watching live, Team WTF1, thank you to you guys. You've witnessed the biggest jinx in history, probably, as Ferrari come out and be the 8th slowest
Haas
team
are going
next
to
year.
win.
Yeah, Haas World Champions
Haas.
confirmed.
Yeah, can't wait. So there you go. That is the rating. So it goes Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, Alpine, AlphaTauri, Aston Martin, Williams, Alfa Romeo, and Haas are the top 10. So I say top 10 like there's any more. There's no more teams. Yes. So there you go. Ferrari win. So I'm ready. They've had their first win of the year, and I am totally buzzing about that. Tommy, final thoughts?
Yeah.
Wow,
please.
That's got to be your worst final thoughts.
Yeah.
There's so little to.
There's so little
go
to
on at the
say.
moment.
So little going
we've
on
kind
in
of
that
gone
brain of yours.
everything. Yeah. Please vote for us in that podcast thing if you can get the website to work.
You're just going to use that every single time
Yeah.
until the voting closes. Brilliant. Katie?
I also don't have a thought.
Come on. You have all these thoughts about these teams, but as soon as I ask for one more thought, you're like, nah. Yeah. Anything, Katie. Really, literally anything.
So this is what it's like.
Wow, it's the start of 2022.
Lots of teams have announced their dates for launching their cars. Is that a final thought?
What about your thoughts like,
It's just news.
I am excited for the car launch. It's not news just in. My final thought
I'm
is...
getting reports. I'm excited for the car launches.
There you go. I will write your final thoughts from here on in. So you can
Thank
just be
you.
my
What are your
robots.
final thoughts, man?
My
Yeah.
final thoughts are, wow, can't believe it's 2 months till the start of the season. I need it to be closer. I've kind of said at the end of the
gonna fly
season,
by.
I'm ready to have a bit of a break. Now I'm ready for all the controversy and carnage again. It's about 3 weeks. Fine. Any more than that, I'm not happy. Of course, I accept they need to have a break, but I just need it back. So thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. Hashtag WTF1 podcast if you want to get involved in the conversation, as always. And that is pretty much it. We are available on all platforms, so please give us a like, comment, subscribe, wherever you are. Doesn't matter.
Oh, I thought of something. I think you can rate podcasts on Spotify now. So do that.
Please
if
do.
you can.
Ooh,
Please rate
okay.
it. Tell us your final
10
thoughts.
out of 10.
That would be great. Give us your final thought in the comments of wherever you are. So that is it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to Team WTF1 for watching along live, as I say, and we'll see you very soon for another podcast. Bye! Frank! Yawn if Charles Leclerc will be world champion. Yes! Yes! 2 wins in this podcast. Let's go.